Tonight is the beginning of the summer series, and as any good coach on a baseball team says, pick out your leadoff hitter carefully. What is the job of a leadoff hitter? Get on base at all costs. You can hit a fly ball, you can hit a Texas leaguer, you can hit a ground ball that someone muffs and throws away, but get on the base. So we have the man who can get on the base as our leadoff speaker. He graduated from Abilene Christian College in 1957. He was there at the same time I was, not quite as old, but same time. When he, as a young man, left the campus, he had grand plans for Brazil. He and an army of missionary hopefuls, young though they be, boarded a ship for Brazil. And it may sound routine now, but let me tell you, in the 1950s, it was a voyage into uncharted waters. I'm going to give him an umbrella for the things I'll say a little more about him, and it's called the shortest biography in the Bible. It's in Acts chapter 10, verse 38. Luke wrote it, and he spoke in that case of Jesus Christ, and the one line he gave him, he went about doing good. And that's what this man has done. He's been in the mission field of Brazil when going to Brazil was much like going to the moon as far as the rest of us are concerned. Since then, he started Harding, Oklahoma Christian, Baxter Institute in Honduras, had an affinity and worked with the Christian Chronicle. He is just, I tell you, he's a fellow that was in school with me. I am really, really proud of Howard Norton. He has done great work in the kingdom. And that's why he's here tonight, and he's got a track record here. He always hits a winning hit, always gets on base, always starts us right. Howard, come preach to us.
Good evening. Well, Robert and I have a mutual admiration society. I appreciate those very kind words. Robert has certainly been an inspiration to me through the years, and even as a student at Abilene Christian, he was inspiring. He was ahead of me, and he was into his upper level courses and his graduate work before I got to that area of my studies, and I admired his diligence, and I have admired for many years the work that he's done here and in so many other places. And I'm always thrilled when I get the invitation to come and speak here at the Waterview congregation. I don't need to tell you that this is one of the great congregations in our brotherhood, and to be asked to come into this pulpit and give a lesson is a great honor. I'm grateful to both of the Roberts for the friendship that they've shown me through the years, and there are many others here that I could say that about. A couple that I want to mention before I get into my lesson are Durwood and Louise Pickle. They go to church with Jane and me, and also with Lavira in the college church in Searcy. And I have an opportunity to be with him every Monday morning virtually when a group of men called Romeos get together to eat breakfast. Now, Romeo can be interpreted exactly for what those letters stand: retired old men eating out. And we retired old men eat out together every Monday morning, and it's a delight to have them in our congregation, and I'm sure that they would love to send greetings to you. I do not know why in the world I would be chosen to speak on the subject, how age blesses the younger generation. I've been trying my best to figure that out, and it's very complicated. I remember a few years ago, shortly after we moved to Searcy, when I was in my probably mid-60s, and feeling very young, frankly, I remember that I was invited to speak to a seniors seminar at the Bentonville Church of Christ one Saturday morning. And Jane and I drove up the night before, and on the way up there, and even I guess after I got there, I kept asking myself the question, why did they ask me to speak at a seniors event? And then it dawned on me, I was a senior. But isn't it amazing how becoming a senior slips up on you? Now, I'm really grateful for these young people right here on the fourth row, and I saw other young people in the audience, and you're going to have to bear with this lesson that's for old people about young people, all right? But I am really grateful for these young people and all the young people in the audience. But actually, what I'm going to say this evening is primarily directed to older people, and it is about young people. How age blesses the younger generation. How age blesses the younger generation. Becoming an older person really is a new experience. It slips up on you. Now, I started being offered a senior discount probably when I was in my 50s, and I didn't like it then. I like it a little better now, but I wish that someday when I buy something that says, you know, you can't have this unless you're 40 years old, someone would ask me to show a card that I'm that old. They never ask me to prove that I'm a senior. I can ask for a senior cup of coffee. I can ask for the senior discount in certain stores, especially in the airports in Latin America. If I don't get in the right line when I'm traveling through the airports, they will come and get me and say, we have a special line for you. Now, I appreciate that more and more all the time, but it still aggravates me because I don't feel as old as I am biologically. The idea, you know, of receiving Social Security, being on Medicare, AARP wanting to get me enrolled in their program, having retiree stamped on my ID card at Harding, I don't particularly like that. But I'm gradually learning to accept it. A poem that's been very helpful and encouraging to me is one that probably some of you know by heart because it's from a very famous English poem by Robert Browning. The poem is named Rabbi Ben Ezra, and a part of it goes like this: grow old along with me. The best is yet to be. The last of life, for which the first was made. Our times are in his hand, who saith, a whole I planned. Youth shows but half. Trust God, see all, nor be afraid. Now that's not an inspired poem, but there are some very interesting truths in that poem. Let me do it in prose, okay? Old age will be better than youth. Youth was made for old age. Our lives are in God's control. God says, I planned your whole life, and youth is only half of it. Trust God. Experience all of life. And don't be afraid. That's a tremendous poem. And it is a famous poem. And I think it helps us appreciate the fact that we have lived as long as we've lived. It is almost unbelievable to me that I have lived 84 years. My mother didn't live that long. My father didn't live that long. None of my grandparents lived that long, except my grandmother on my daddy's side. I don't think their parents lived that long. And the Lord has let me live for 84 years. And I believe that using the title of the summer series, Call to Bless, I think that we are called to bless as senior citizens. And I believe that we are called to bless young people. And that those of us who are older can be and should be a blessing to those who are young. There are certain aspects of this lesson that are going to be autobiographical. And I know that there's a danger in preaching things that are autobiographical, and I don't want to wear you out with my stories. But some of my stories are going to be about me. I'm one of the oldest people in this audience, if not the oldest. And I believe that I have a responsibility to be a blessing to these young people that are right here on this fourth row, and to be a blessing to some of the young people toward the back that I saw as I came in. I think I have an obligation to be a blessing to people that are about to get married, to those who are just married, to those who have young children, to those who are going through those years of difficulty when your children are about to leave home and go to college. I have been there. I think I need to use my experiences and what I've learned, and I think all older people should use those experiences and what they've learned to be a blessing to others. And I want to mention this evening, in the few minutes that I have, I want to mention some ways that we can be a blessing to younger people. The first thing I want to say is that we can be a blessing through our teaching and through our example. Through our teaching and through our example. One of the most interesting passages on the subject of aging is in Titus chapter 2, the first part of that chapter, where Paul is telling Titus what he needs to teach the churches in Crete. And he says in verse 2, older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women, likewise, are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. We have a responsibility to teach younger people. Now, there's a point, you're going to have to bear with me this evening because I'm having a bout with allergies. There is a sense in which we need to actually teach people lessons. And I don't believe that I have to be an old person to be helpful to people who are younger than I am. Some of the greatest help I've received in my life, even as a young person, were lessons that I learned from young men especially, who were maybe 2 or 3 years older than I was. Maybe someone who was a senior in high school when I was a sophomore. Or maybe someone like Robert Oglesby, who I think maybe was a junior when I was a freshman. I learned from those men. I watched those men. I listened to what those men said. And I want to encourage the young people to be teachers of younger young people, children. But in a particular way, those of us who are older, who are seniors, who have reared children, who have suffered sadness, who have known great joy, who have seen the seasons of life, we have a responsibility to teach and model Christian values. I called a man this morning who a few weeks ago came up to me after a Wednesday class in Searcy to tell me a story about how he had learned to be generous. I called him today to get him to tell me the story again because I wanted to have the details straight. When he was a teenage boy, another teenager about 2 years older than he was, who had obeyed the gospel about 2 years earlier than he did, came up to him after he had been a Christian for a very short time, and he said to him, JB, how much are you giving to the Lord on Sunday? And JB said, oh, I put in $1 or maybe $2, whatever I might have in my pocket. And this boy, who was just about 2 years older, said, well, JB, I want to challenge you to do something. He said, I want to challenge you to start right now giving 10% of your salary, your gross salary. I want to challenge you to give 10% of it to the Lord. And JB said, man, I can't do that. He said, I barely am able to pay my bills just putting in $1 or $2. I couldn't possibly give 10%. He said, well, I want to make a deal with you. You put in 10% of your gross salary when you get your next paycheck. And he said, if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, then I'll pay whatever is missing in the amount you need. I want you to do that next time you get paid. And JB said, I did it. And he said, I had money to pay my bills. And he said, ever since that day, I have never given less than 10%. And I have always had enough money to live on and to take care of my obligations. Now, this man has served as an elder in another congregation, the man who learned to be generous. And he now is a senior citizen. And he told me a few years ago when I was an elder in my congregation, our elders made a challenge to the church that if they would give 10% of their salary, that if they didn't have enough money left over because of that 10% contribution, we in the church would pay the difference. And he said, I've had quite a number of them come up and tell me they did it. And he said, we never had a single person have to ask us for help because they didn't have enough money to pay their bills, giving 10%. Now, when we talk about teaching and being an example, we're not necessarily talking about standing up before a group of people like I'm standing before you tonight, but teaching people one-on-one, conversing with them, working side by side with them, explaining things to them, explaining to young people some very basic things that maybe nobody explained to you and you had to learn. In this passage right here, the very idea that Titus would tell older women that they need to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and they are to train young women to love their husbands and children. Well, mothers of Israel, your job is to teach younger women, not necessarily in a classroom setting. Teach that young mother to love her baby, to love her husband. Teach her how to love that baby when she finds another baby is on the way and she hadn't prepared for it. Teach her to love them. All you have to do to see that even the mothers, many times, don't know the basics about how to love a child. All you have to do is read the newspaper, listen to the TV reports, see how many children are being killed by their parents. So we can be a blessing to young people by teaching and modeling Christian behavior. We can be a blessing to young people by encouraging them. Young people need encouragement. I might have mentioned to you before that when I was a teenager, I thought if I could ever get through the teenage years, my temptation days would be over. Then I thought, man, if I can ever get through my 20s, if I can just get married, my temptation days will be over. Let me tell you something. The temptation days are never over. They are never over. And discouragement days are never over. Young people, no matter how much they're smiling when they're in Brahms, no matter how much they're laughing when they're in a group, they need to be encouraged. One area that they need to be encouraged in terms of what their strengths are, what they're good at, what they can do to perfect those skills. I went to Abilene Christian, graduated at the end of my 4th year. I wasn't sure when I started to school that I was going to be able to make it. Nobody in my immediate family, nobody on my daddy's side, and only one on my mother's side had ever made it to graduation in college. I didn't know if I could make it or not. And when I graduated, I decided I'd like to get a master's degree, but I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And I remember at the end of my first semester of graduate work, we decided to move to Houston, and I would work with a church there. Now, I had been taking a Greek class at Abilene Christian, taught by J.W. Roberts. There were 2 of us young men in that class, and Frank Pack, Dr. Frank Pack, who was one of the brightest men around, audited that class with us 2 boys. Now that raises the bar. And I was embarrassed just about every day when I went to class because he was going to hear me read. He was one of the students as an auditor. And I remember when I told him that I was going to move to Houston, he said, "Well, Howard, are you going to continue your graduate work?" And I said, "Well, I really want to. I hope I can." He said, "Howard, you need to finish your graduate work. You need to get a master's degree because you have the ability to do it. You've got a good mind, and you need to continue to train yourself." Wow. He told me something I didn't know. He saw something in me I didn't know was there. I thought maybe it was there, but when Frank Pack tells you it's there, you believe it. Our young people need encouragement. And for that matter, we older people need encouragement. I think one of the most powerful passages in the Bible is Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. It says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. Now, if you're like me, I've read that passage all my life, thinking it meant don't swear, don't curse, don't use bad language. Oh, it means that. But you know something else it means? Don't be a discourager. Don't let your language tear people down. Make your language something that builds people up. And we can be such a blessing to young people if we will help them see their talents and encourage them to become all that they are capable of becoming. We can be a blessing also by helping young people attain their dreams. It's so easy to tell a young person that an idea of his won't work. We reared 3 children, and I know from experience that sometimes the dreams of young people don't work. And sometimes they may be so dangerous that they need to be told that. But be careful when you tell a young person that his dream won't work. I will always be grateful to the people who believed us when we were students at Abilene Christian in 1957. And when we announced that we were forming a team and we were going to take it somewhere in the world, and that eventually became Brazil. There were some people who said it wouldn't work immediately. There's some people who tried to discourage us from that idea immediately. But there were some people who got behind us, and they encouraged us. And 4 years from the time we made that decision, there were 16 families ready to move to Brazil and move there and live there for years as missionaries. I remember a man by the name of Fletcher Daly Sr. Is there anybody here who knew Fletcher Daly Sr.? He had been an elder for many years at the Central Church in Houston, and due to an accident when he was struck by a car, he became blind, probably when he was in his 40s. For a short time, he regained his sight, and then he lost it again. He was totally blind. And he was an elder in the McGregor Park Church, where I was an associate minister. And I was trying to raise money to go to Brazil. And my buddies were trying to raise money to go to Brazil. And honestly, we were so young. We were about 23, 24 years old, 25 years old, trying to raise money. And I guess I shouldn't blame people who didn't believe in us, maybe. I mean, people usually thought we were Mormon missionaries, you know, who rode around on bicycles. And in fact, we made good friends with the Mormon missionaries in Brazil, played them in football. That was a big mistake. They almost killed us. But I asked Brother Daly, who couldn't see at all, I said, Brother Daly, I need help with these churches in Houston. Would you be willing to go with me when I have a meeting with the elders and vouch for me and vouch for our team? He said, I'd be happy to do that. Well, everybody in the city who was a member of the church knew Fletcher Daly, an outstanding elder. And I would go into those elders' meetings looking like I was fresh out of college. And when I got through explaining to them our plans, Brother Daly, who couldn't see anything, sitting there at the table, would say, Brethren, let me say something. I know these young men. I think he called us boys. I know these boys. This is one of the finest group of young fellas that I know. And you can see Howard, you know him. I want to vouch for him, but I want to vouch for the team. And I want to tell you something, he said. If you support Howard, you're really supporting the whole team, because these boys are going to work as a team. And you're going to get a lot more for your money if you support this team. You think it wasn't easier to raise money with that kind of support from an older man, a man who was in his 70s, maybe his 80s? When he spoke, people listened. And sometimes that's what young people need more than anything else in life, is for an older person to stand up and say, I know this young woman. I know this young man. And they are young. But I know that they're capable. And I believe what they're trying to do, they're going to be able to do. And I want to encourage you to back them. We can be a blessing to young people. We can either use the age that we have to be a blessing, or we can sit in our rocker and rot. Now, there are some people who can't get out of the rocker. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those of us who can still get out of bed, walk, travel, do the jobs we can do with the energy and the age that we have. We need to be busy working and helping and blessing lives, and especially the lives of young people. And so maybe it's not so bad to be old. Grow old along with me. The best is yet to be. The last of life, for which the first was made. Our times are in God's hand, who saith, "A whole I planned, youth shows but half. Trust God, see all, nor be afraid." Isn't it great to be the age we are? God bless you.